While the winter weather obviously making life even more difficult for Erie's homeless.
Still, with overnight temperatures plummeting below zero, Winnipeg shelters are scrambling.
People are looking for easy moral virtue, and so it's easy to be virtuous by having a messy life and saving the planet. And then it's simplest to save the planet by concentrating on one thing. And then it's simplest to concentrate on carbon dioxide as if that's the only environmental challenge that confronts us. And so you have this overweening, prideful, and ignorant requirement to put yourself forward as some kind of planetary savior. You reduce the complexity of that problem to opposing carbon, and then if you can stick it to the rich just as an additional benefit to your envy, so much the better. No one wants to talk like Bjorn Lomborg talks about the multidimensional environmental challenges that confront us, about rank ordering them in some kind of economically intelligent way, and in treating the challenges that confront us like adults might do it instead of like Greta Thunberg might do it. And I think the treatment that's been handed out to her is exactly emblematic of the whole problem. She's a relatively eccentric 13-year-old girl. She doesn't know anything about how the world works. And yet green leaders around the world kowtow to her like she's some sort of Dionysian prophetess. And that's a real indictment of the situation that we find ourselves in.
This notion of energy density is really the key to being able to reduce the impact on the planet. And LNG, because you can have a smaller footprint in developing those. And when you have a smaller footprint, you're going to have, just by definition, less impact on the environment. But what I worry about on our side of the spectrum is that we only talk in dollars and cents, and we don't address this environmental piece. This is the emotional piece that everybody cares about. I want people to understand that yes, we can provide energy security. Yes, we can address issues of affordability, and we can do it in a way that is going to be the most environmentally responsible, bar none, looking at all of the other options and all of the other producers around the world. That is going to be, I think, our big communication challenge.
The Conservatives have erred tremendously, and the central Liberals as well, the middle-of-the-road Liberals, by letting the radicals take the moral upper hand on the environment front. And you look at what's going to happen in Europe and around the world, likely this winter, as we put tremendous stress on poor people by jacking up energy and food prices, is all that's going to be disastrous for the planet. In the terms that the environmentalists themselves hypothetically hold dear, the idea that we can make the planet more habitable on the environmental front by impoverishing poor people, by raising energy prices and food prices is absolutely, it's not only absurd logically, but I think it's tantamount to genocidal in its intent. It's really appalling.
It creates grave danger for those who are on fixed income going into an environment, especially in our northern climates, January, February, March, April. It's dangerous not to have reliable power, not to be able to have reliable home heating. And we have to be mindful that, as you say, the people most impacted by that are the ones at the lower end of the income scale. And so if you are forcing a senior citizen to make a choice of reducing their food bill or reducing their pharmaceuticals so that they can keep their electricity and their heating on, those are not decisions that any government should be forcing their people to make. But that's the decision this is logically where the policies of those on the extreme green left have led to, is that they are now sacrificing those at the lower end of the income scale, which they put their heart on the sleeve and they say that that's who they care about. But it's just demonstrably untrue when you see the impact of it. And I'll add one more to it. The only people that I have heard talk about the plight of those who are living in countries that do not have reliable energy and the impoverishment that occurs from it are some of the energy executives that are at our global conferences. This is part of the reason why we need to get reliable natural gas around the world, because when you look at some of the most impoverished countries in the world, they're using wood and dung and coal to heat their homes. I talked to somebody, a researcher in British Columbia, who said we have 44 million deaths per year because of indoor air quality problems. And so why is that not elevated as an issue that we know we can solve by having these secure types of energy? LNG is going to be a solution.
And specifically, that's a great question. If there were 5,000 deaths from nuclear power a year, which there aren't, the legacy press and the left-wing liberal types would be all over that like mad. but the fact that there are 40 million people or thereabouts a year who die from indoor pollution from using substandard fuels, which by the way are not environmentally friendly in the broader sense either, that just goes under the radar completely. And so you look at facts like that, and that's a bloody, blatant fact, that one. And it's children that are disproportionately affected on that front too. And then you also look at the willingness of the so-called leftists who are hypothetically in favor of the poor to impoverish the poor as a consequence of their non-effective green policies. And you really have to ask, well, just what the hell is driving this? And the only answer that I can think of is that it's something fundamentally predicated on envy, and that the desire to bring down the capitalist system that produces those who are richer than the typical environmentalist, let's say, that takes precedence over everything. It takes precedence over care for the poor. It takes precedence even over hypothetical care for the planet. It's like tear the bloody capitalist system down, and it doesn't matter what or who gets destroyed in the process. Because otherwise, how do you explain it? Like the indoor air pollution fact alone, it's like that's incomprehensible. Obviously, the thing to do is to get cheap energy that's clean as possible, to developing countries as fast as possible. And then, on the environmental side, the stats are pretty damn clear that if you can get the gross domestic product of a country up to something averaging approximately $5,000 US a year, then people start taking a long view and caring about the environment. And so it's quite obvious that if we did everything we could to eradicate absolute poverty, mostly by driving energy prices down, then we could get people off of their reliance on those primitive biofuels that poison them and poison the planet and denude the territory, and we could get them caring about the environment. And so why not do that?